Good evening. Welcome back to Gooner Fanzine TV. We've got Johnny Phillips, Sky Sports broadcaster, Wolves fan, and all-round top bloke, and obviously Grumpy Glen. We're just going to have a quick chat. Johnny's been watching Arsenal for more than 30 years as a punter and as a broadcaster, and we're just going to talk about John's favourite three or top three Arsenal players that he's watched, and just have a sort of chat about the Arsenal and the teams and the players that John's seen over the years. So, John, take us through that. So let's just do it in reverse order. So
go on then.
Number three, who would you say of all the Arsenal players that you've watched over the years?
Well, again, I'm coming at it from a far less educated point than most people watching this, but from an outsider's perspective, Marc Overmars is definitely in my top three. There's something about raw pace that I find just like really, really exhilarating. When you've got a player who you know, no matter how good or bad he is on the ball, can beat a man for pace. If you're a defender, you must be thinking, oh Christ, what's coming my way? And I loved watching Marc Overmars because I just thought there was something about him when he just got the ball at his feet and knocked it past someone. You just thought, that's it, he's gone. Yeah. And he was in that sort of era when wingers were slightly going out of fashion. The 80s were long gone, and they weren't that fashionable. And then Overmars came on the scene, and there's a couple of games in particular that he just stood out for. Obviously, it was when he won at Old Trafford and everything. But yeah, I loved Overmars. I loved watching him because when he got the ball, you thought, right, here we go, something's going to happen here.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the fact you've chosen Marc Overmars as well. He's not so much a cult figure. He's just a real hero to Arsenal fans, certainly to me and a lot of other people. But yeah, obviously the first game we're going to have to talk about is the United game away in March '98. I was at the game. I don't know if you were, Glen, as well, but it was just a really amazing sort of performance from Overmars. He absolutely roasted Gary Neville that day. And obviously when Overmars came to Arsenal in the sort of summer of '97, August '97, he did take a while to settle. Mm-hmm. And it was almost like people are sort of talking about, big players that Arsenal signed since have taken a while to settle. Yeah. And we always sort of, certainly people of my vintage, our vintage, will sort of reference the fact that Overmars did take a while to settle. We obviously knew he was a class act, knew he was a great player, knew hopefully that he would actually acclimatise and show his real skills. But it took a few months, and basically the penny dropped, and it was just like, do you know what? This is what I have to do to excel in Premier League football. And that like you say, that Man United game at Old Trafford in March '98, that was still one of my favourite all-time Arsenal games. Just for the fact, obviously, the goal, the importance of that day.
Yeah, quite. It's the moment as well,
absolutely,
isn't it? It's
the
moment.
Yeah. Celebration.
The celebration, yeah. And that's probably where, that... watching from the outside, that settling in period is something that would have passed me by. I wouldn't have got that. I'm watching him very much as a highlights player, dipping in and out of Arsenal. And whenever I looked at them, I thought, oh, Overmars, brilliant. And he was great. So I wouldn't have had to go through all that, here's a player settling in and the rest of it. My view of him was someone who just had this raw pace, and when I watched him play on the television, mostly in those days, it was I just loved watching it. But again, I haven't got the perspective that you've got that he took a while to settle.
I think one of the things about that was although sort of football had opened up and sort of like you were watching sort of European games, there was still an element of mystery. You watch World Cups, you would see the odd international and stuff, but knew he was a good player with a great rep and that, but just really didn't realise how quick he was. So he seemed to sort of like, Highbury was deceptively small. Yeah. A small stadium, but quite a big pitch. But he just used to seem to sort of like burn up that touchline. Yeah. And
it's a good point you make about the sort of the players coming into the country as well. I think we were still in that era of exciting foreign talent. Now you don't even blink, do you? When we sign a big name player from overseas, but I remember those first few years in the Premier League of just ridiculously talented continental players coming here, and it was so exciting.
No YouTube, couldn't go on YouTube and see
none of that.
What's he like.
None of that. No one knew anything about them, apart from the big name players who'd starred at World Cups or European Championships, and it all began in that sort of Hullet era and the rest of it. But it was incredible. There was definitely a buzz around the Premier League when Overmars signed.
I didn't quite realise how big and how talented he was. It was, but well, it didn't take long to prove.
There's always something. There's a mystique about the Dutch as well. Dutch. Well, you can sign a Dutch player, and he automatically gets an extra game to prove himself because he's Dutch. We'll forgive him. He's Dutch. He's bound to be good.
Absolutely. I love the fact you chose Overmars. He's one of our absolute all-time favourite players for Arsenal, basically. But let's go on to number 2 then, the sort of...
Well, this is going back to my childhood, and when I first started watching Arsenal through this family friend who used to take me along to the games when they played up in the north of England, and David Rocastle. I really sort of fell in love with him. When he got the ball, maybe I'm just a bit biased to players who aren't afraid to be on the ball. I loved it when Rocastle was on the ball because I just thought he really wanted it, and it was a bit more kick and rush as well in those days. It was a different style of football. It was pre-Wenger, and you just felt that Rocastle treasured the ball when it was given to him.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I remember it would have been October 1988. Obviously, I was sort of going back a couple of years. I saw his debut in September 1985 against Newcastle. It was 0-0 draw. This sort of 17, 18-year-old lad, he was powerful as anything.
Yeah.
We're like,
Set of thighs on him.
Say again.
Set of thighs on him, didn't he?
Oh, he
big strong lad, wasn't he? Yeah.
Absolutely. And he had character, he had confidence, he had talent, he had technique, great temperament as well, and a popular lad as well. He was the package, and he was a local lad, obviously South Londoner, obviously a Londoner basically, and we loved him, and he was just brilliant. But sort of October '88, I know we were sort of Arsenal were playing Liverpool. If we were going to date this potentially, but Arsenal playing Liverpool in the League Cup on Wednesday. It's Monday now. Yeah. And I remember we played Liverpool in the 3rd round in October 1988. It was 1-0. Arsenal took 6,000 fans up to Anfield. We were going to Edge Hill. You had to get to Edge Hill station, and it was literally free travel club trains getting there.
Yeah,
like you say, everyone to schools. You get on there, you get the coach or the buses, I should say.
Yeah, that's right.
Edge Hill down Anfield. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it was just you know yourself about sort of Merseyside football. And there was a real crackling atmosphere at Anfield. As there is for sort of big games and stuff like that. Yeah. And it was an evening game, obviously, and there was 6,000 Arsenal, and it was just a cracking game. Yeah. And there was a real burgeoning of talent that night that was coming to the fore. These sort of youngsters who were going to sort of ultimately sort of take Arsenal to the league in 1989. But Rocky scored an absolute cracker, 30-yarder from sort of outside the box, obviously, in front of 6,000 Arsenal fans. And he's an absolute Arsenal legend. I'm so glad you chose him, John. Actually.
So in the interview you did with Lee Dixon the other day, he was talking about Rocastle and said he was a real gent off the pitch, like very caring. So he said, he sort of like was always one of the first people to welcome new players. And that.
Yes.
But he said when he went on that pitch, he was a tough cookie. As well as being very skillful. He got stuck in.
Yeah. Fever, basically.
Yeah. It must have been a strange team to come into because there's obviously been the excesses and the sort of what happened in the 80s, and a team that wasn't really going anywhere and didn't have much to it. Players that were probably by their own admission underachieving, and then as a youngster to come into that environment, I guess you go one of two ways, don't you? You sort of rise above it and see a future for yourself, or you just think, I'll join the party and we'll carry on underachieving. And it must have been an interesting time for him to come into a football team and not necessarily have had anything to aspire to.
Yeah.
And in that sense, you've got to make your own career, and I think he very much did.
Yeah, absolutely.
The other thing to thank him for is we probably wouldn't have had Brighty at the club.
Well,
if it
wasn't
for he sort of told him that he was good enough, and he told him to knuckle down when he was at Palace and stuff. And as soon as that opportunity to play for Arsenal was, Rocastle said, you've got to do it, mate.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah. I mean,
you got a bit of a 2-for-1 there, really.
Yeah.
And that probably shows the character of the man, doesn't it? In terms of how influential he's been, and obviously you hear Ian Wright talk about him, and he gets incredibly emotional all the time.
Extremely,
And what a great legacy to have that sort of a big an imprint on your peers. It's fantastic.
Absolutely. And obviously as a broadcaster, players like Alan Smith, former players, Arsenal legends. And he talks so. I mean, I've sort of interviewed him as well, Gooner Fanzine and stuff. And he talks so lovingly about Rocky, doesn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, God, they all do. Merce, Nigel Winterburn, they all speak so highly of him as what a man he was as well.
Yeah.
Which is good to hear, because they always say you should never meet your heroes, don't they? From your perspective, you never meet your heroes and all the rest of it. There's nothing worse than if you hear of a player you've really loved and think, he wasn't all that off the pitch. But
absolutely.
Good family man as well.
Every story you hear about Rocky is like just a great person.
He did live up to the legend.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think any Arsenal fan can disagree with John Shaw said, to be fair, and we could talk about Rocky all day basically. But go on then, give us a number one then.
Number one, And there's one goal in particular that sticks out in my mind, but number one always has to be Dennis Bergkamp. I've just never seen anyone like him in British football.
Absolutely.
And then when you get to, luckily with my work, I get to work with Paul Merson and a few others, and then you get to speak to Merce about what it was like to play with Bergkamp. And I know Merce hasn't got the greatest dictionary in the world ever, but he genuinely hasn't got the words for playing with Bergkamp. It's just like, there are no words. The game that sticks out in my mind was, again, it's not a massive game by any stretch, but it's Sunderland away at Roker Park. Do you remember the old Roker Park?
Absolutely.
And he was, he was far left-hand corner, just getting towards the box, and he just gets out of this tight spot. And then not only does he does that bit, and then he just swings it into the corner. This incredible curler into the top corner, down in the Roker end. And I always remember Merce's reaction was like, "Oh,
that's right, yeah."
It's not like Merce hasn't got the ability. It's when when another footballer sees something special on the pitch, you think, God, that must have been special, and it looked special, and it's little stuff like that. And then of course there was the hat-trick away at Leicester City, which was another which was another brilliant moment. I just loved Bergkamp for the time that he made. Do you know what, funny enough, I'm digressing here now, but Merce, a few years ago on Soccer Saturday, we got Merce along to play for a non-league side called Welshpool. They were struggling at the time, and we signed him up for this. And they wrote to Soccer Saturday or something and saying, "Have you got any players?" And for a joke, we lent them a couple of players. So Merson played for them, and he was 49 at the time. And I remember going up to film the game at this Welsh league standard, and just thinking, God, how much time have you got? He just made time and space for himself. And I just thought that's Paul Merson at 49, but that's what a class player is. And then Merson speaks of Bergkamp as how he made time for himself. I was like, well, hang on, you made time for yourself. And everyone who speaks about Bergkamp is said nothing was hurried or rushed.
No.
He had all the time in the world, whatever space he was in. And then he had the talent, he was just so gifted. And it was just, oh God, Bergkamp.
On and off the pitch, apparently.
Is that? Oh yeah, well there you go.
Listen to Wright's stories about rooming with him. He just
Is that
said
right?
everything was perfect. My mate used to call him a racehorse. He said he's got to be right. His ears have got to be pricked up.
Yeah. Did he wear pajamas or something?
Silk pajamas and his slippers and.
Brilliant. And then going back to what we were saying earlier about Overmars and the Premier League boys, and Hullet stands out as one of the first arrivals, but Bergkamp, the early arrivals in the Premier League, and it basically Bergkamp he didn't just do it for Arsenal, he did it for the Premier League.
Yeah.
Bergkamp's turning up in the Premier League.
Him and Zola, I think, were the real big two.
Just big players. If they turn up here, and then the floodgates opened a bit after that. If it's good enough for Bergkamp, it's good enough for everyone. Yeah. Great to see him here.
I remember when we signed him, I'll never forget this. It was fantasy football, Badil and Skinner, and Danny Baker was a guest. I've got a lot of time for Danny Baker. I do respect him. But he just sat down in that chair and he said, "Oh, we're getting obsessed with foreign signings." He said, "Look at Bergkamp, he's clapped out." Possibly the worst summation of a player I've ever seen in my life. Brilliant. Because, and it wasn't just the goals, it was just, you would see moments in games. I forget a European game, Layth, you'll probably remember, but he set one up for Lundberg. It was just that he held off about 3 players, stepped over it, just waited for Lundberg to come and then just hit this slide rule pass.
Yeah.
But you would always see a moment in every single game. You think, I've never seen anyone do anything like that. Yeah, and, again, going back to you interviewing Dixon, he said, there's no question, Bergkamp the best player. You see him in training. Yeah. Wright is just in constant throw to him, just obsessed with the man. Yeah.
And if someone like Wright is saying that.
Well, that's the thing. I think you can't underestimate the impact.
If players are saying that,
So, Bergkamp turns up, and it's not just what he's doing on the pitch, it's the impact he's having on the others. And, he's making the impossible possible. Yeah. And, he sort of, you look at these players and say, if Wrighty's alongside of him and he's thinking, I can do that, or at least I can try that. Okay, and he's opening up possibilities. I never thought of that. Maybe I'll try this, maybe do that. It's the effect they have on others. It's not just him as a footballer and what he offers the team. It's the effect he has on all of those around him. And clearly, as you've done, you speak to all these former Arsenal players who played with him, and he made this incredible impact. And without any shadow of a doubt, it's just
always Dennis, isn't it? Everyone. Who's the best? Dennis.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a brilliant piece in David Winner's sort of book on Bergkamp, basically. Yeah. And he talks about Bergkamp as a kid. There's a sort of 10,000 hour rule or sort of theory or whatever. And he said basically Bergkamp had railings outside his house, and they were sort of bent and broken and all that. and he would literally do left foot ball railing, right foot ball railing, and he would do that for 5-6 hours a day.
Yeah.
That was honing his technique basically. And
Incredible.
I was reading that, yeah, absolutely. And you see that, and you just go, no wonder these sort of,
I know.
Yeah, the English core sort of looked up to him at the time. Yeah,
incredible. If only you could get on a plane.
Yeah.
I think of the player we could have been.
Mate, honestly,
Joking aside, I think that may have cost us from time to time. You know.
Do you remember? You may or not remember this. Remember Euro 2000 in Holland and Belgium, and
was that
we were out there, and I remember at Eindhoven. I went to the England-Portugal game,
the
Eindhoven,
3-2,
3-2, and we had the best night out ever in Eindhoven. And there was this song called Something Dennis Beer, and it was just huge. And there was this main street in Eindhoven with all the bars, and everyone was out them. And every bar they were playing this Dennis Beer song. And I remember speaking to the Dutch saying, "What's this Dennis Beer song?" And they said, "Oh, it's a really good song about how Dennis Bergkamp can't fly, but we keep playing him with beer." And it's like, "I'm Dennis Beer." So eventually, give him enough beer that he doesn't care, and he gets on a plane. And I remember Euro 2000, and we got knocked out in the group stage. Obviously, so we were back home quickly. I remember coming back with a CD of I'm Dennis Beer or something it was called.
I need to hear that.
It's brilliant. You'll find it on YouTube, and it was a classically Dutch song. It was one of those Dutch anthems, and it was just pumping out. I just remember it in Eindhoven more than any other city, pumping out this Dennis Beer song, and it was just all about getting Dennis so clattered that he could climb aboard a plane and all would be right with the world.
It would.
Yeah,
absolutely love
that. I'm sure you'll find it on YouTube.
I mean, obviously talking about sort of grassroots football a minute ago. You yourself, you play for change the tax slightly.
Yeah. God, Christ,
you've
Dennis
Bergkamp.
Dennis Bergkamp.
From Dennis Bergkamp, Johnny Phillips, Sunday football.
Yeah. Since I've lived in London, I moved to London in 2000, and I've played for a Sunday League team ever since. Now, the last few years I've had kids, so it's very infrequently. I think last season I played 4 or 5 games for them. But yeah, we play our home games at Regent's Park. We're sort of we pride ourselves on being a North London club. There's a lot of debate. Most players live, well, I'd say it's virtually a 50-50 split, south or north of the river. And we play a lot of games at Wandsworth Park, Wandsworth Common and Tooting and all that. But our home ground is Regent's Park, and we're very much a north of the river club. But we're a terrible, terrible club as well. We only had 9 declarations on Sunday. I couldn't play because I was out with the kids, but we lost 13-0 on Sunday. Our team
still Southampton.
I know. Our team's called the Heroes of Waterloo, and I think that 13-0 defeat was our biggest ever defeat. We've had a few. I've played in a 13-2 defeat, and I've played in a 12-1 defeat. But we've had our moments as well. We've got to the that Sunday League Cup final. We've won the odd league here and there. But bear in mind, I moved to London almost 20 years ago, and I'm still playing for them. That tells you all you need to know about how good they are. They were a lad in their 20s they were given a game to. Now they're giving a lad in their 40s a game to. So we're not the best.
But there's a very special record attached to that, isn't
there?
There
is. So we're called the Heroes of Waterloo, and we were founded by a bunch of lads who moved down to London in the mid-90s, and I joined them a bit later. And in the 650, 700 games we've ever played, we have never fielded the same 11 twice.
Wow.
So every single fixture we've ever played, it's got a different starting 11.
I watched you once about 5 years ago as well.
Which probably explains the trouble we're in a way, because
how many in the squad? 12.
I
mean,
honestly, it's talk about squad rotation.
And we've had lads that have played now. Their sons are turning along.
Wow,
yeah. So
that's horrible as well.
We're hanging on in there. We have our biggest claim to fame was we went on tour to Split in Croatia 1 year, and Robert Yarni played for us. So that was over. So Robert Yarni has played for the Heroes of Waterloo.
And Johnny Phillips.
That's why we're so bad.
What positions you played? I'm trying to remember.
Forward, I play up front.
Really?
Yeah, I used to be a nippy forward. Now I'm very much a backs to the goal, salt and pepper, aging forward. But back in the day, I was a forward. Yeah.
Oh mate, fair play. I'm loving hearing you sort of talk about the Arsenal stuff. And you obviously watched Arsenal.
Yeah,
it's a professional and as a punter for a long time now. But,
it's great. You know, they're one of these clubs, aren't you, where you can't not notice Arsenal. I mean, talking from obviously people who watch this are Arsenal fans, so of course they are. But from a neutral perspective, they're a club that you do notice. They're on everyone's radar, and even when they're going through struggles like they are now, they're very much on people's. There's still something about from a Wolves perspective, there's a handful of fixtures you look over at the season that you want to see. You always want to see an Arsenal game, definitely.
Absolutely. In case you guys don't know as well, John's obviously he's a hugely professional, well-respected broadcaster. He's a Wolves fan as well. We obviously got Wolves on Saturday. You've written a book as well, Bitten by Wolves.
Bitten by Wolves,
Talk us through a bit about that.
So it was basically just a collection of stories try, in my opinion, sum up what the club's about and has always been about. Going back, I actually interviewed Billy Wright's daughter, Vicky.
Who was an ex-Arsenal manager.
Of course, Billy, and he's obviously our greatest ever player and one of England's greatest ever players. He lifted the league title 3 times.
Married to one of the Beverley sisters.
Married to one of the Beverley sisters, Joy Beverley. Great knowledge. Loving it, Glen. Great knowledge, Glen. And then obviously, and Vicky, I met up with Vicky, who lives down in London, and she told me the story about Billy as a man and a dad and a sort of husband rather than a player. And it was things like that. And then it goes through the 70s with Kenny Hibbert, the 80s when we went bankrupt twice, and then more recently up to the present day. And I wrote it over the course of a season, which was last season, our first season back for years under the Chinese owners that we've got now. And we qualified for Europe, so it was a good season. First time we qualified for Europe since 1980. And I'd like to think it sort of sums up what following Wolves is all about. There's a lot of interviews with ex-players, managers, but also staff, people who've worked behind the scenes at the club, dressing room attendants, the secretary, landladies, just what makes a club sort of thing.
Is it out now?
It's out now.
I would like to get a signed copy of you because I've got a friend in the pub, Big Nev.
There you go.
Huge Wolves fan.
Really?
There you go.
Same age
Everyone
as
knows
me.
a Wolves fan, don't they? As well? Everyone knows a Wolves fan.
He would be delighted for that.
All right,
We'll
sort it out. We'll sort it out.
Big Nev, John's on the case soon.
Brilliant.
Honestly, thank you so much for your
Thanks
time.
for having me. I really
Honestly, we could
appreciate
blabber
it.
on for
I've
hours,
loved having
mate.
a chat to you. It's
Honestly.
been brilliant.
Top man.
Good to meet you, mate.
Yeah.
Thank you. Really enjoyed it.
Cheers, John.
Thanks.
Top man. All the best. Cheers.